to the Osage Minerals Council special meeting Tuesday, February the 4th, 2020. We called to order this meeting. I'd like to have an opening prayer. I've asked my elder to pray for us this morning, Congressman Mason. And let's rise to our people.
Almighty Father God, we come this morning and we say again, thank you for the blessings of this rain and the weather and the elements that humble us, Father. We thank you for these things that you give us. We gather ourselves here today, Father God, in this very special room where so many of our people have made grand decisions, and we're talking today, Father, and listening today to one another and to encourage one another and to have good fellowship as one people, Father God, in here in this place, Father God. So be with us and take care of the things that we say and the things that we listen to, and let our hearts speak for the betterment of our people. For those that are in decision-making positions, Father, just guide them each and every day and every moment of their lives. Put the angels' wings around each and every one of us. And Father God, bless our Osage people. In the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Please be seated. Brother, can I join us? Welcome.
Councilwoman Foreman, present. Councilwoman Gray, here. Councilwoman Hart, Councilman Redcorn,
Here.
Councilman Red Eagle,
Here.
Councilman Rebar,
Present.
Chairman Waller,
Here.
Secretary Yates.
Present.
We have a quorum.
With that, I believe that we show it as executive, but I think that will only be if necessary on this item. Today, we have brought you all together, and to start off with, I'd like to address my chief this morning. Thank you for being here and our people. For our speaker, Speaker Tillman, thank you, brother, for being here. And I want to recognize is that your folks all sat in these spots. And with that, I know you've honored them today. With my Congress here today, my elders, I want to thank you all for being here. We support you, what you do. That's how we get into this chairs, because you're the right people for the job. And I want to impress on you is that with my council, there's days in which you feel like maybe you're not, you are. You just do the best you can, and that's why we've invited you over here. This new Terra law, the Tribal Energy Resources Agreement, is just rolling out with its new effort on what it's going to be to the nation. And us as the council, we are having to look at what is the federal rollout on this. And without getting too far ahead of our council here, we'd like to tell you is that that's what the meeting's about. Later, we might need to go in an executive to tell you what our plans is strategically, and with your blessings, that's how we'll roll it out. With that being said, does the council have any comments to make before I turn it over to Mr. Pipestein? Council.
Okay, Lynette, how are we doing on the PowerPoint here?
We're ready.
Okay. Do I have a clicker to be able to? Start by saying it's an honor for me to be able to address the leadership of the Osage Nation, Principal Chief, and our Minerals Council, the Osage Congress. And so the Minerals Council has resolved that they want to explore, without having committed to this, a tribal energy resource agreement. Now, the reason that they have said we're not ready to commit to this is because there's a lot of uncertainty in exactly what this would be, right? So I think the Minerals Council's view, and I'm, of course, to be corrected by the Minerals Council members here, is that there is a lot we know from this new rule, but there's a lot we don't know yet. And a lot that we would learn from in the process of, in the new regulation, it creates a pre-application process and other ways to find out specific information about exactly what a Terra would mean for the Osage Nation, and in particular the Osage Mineral Estate. So just quickly, kind of overview. The final rule was published on December 18th, 2019. Many of you participated in the tribal consultation they had over at Hard Rock. And so it was clear at the time the Department of the Interior was still trying to figure out what this new law meant. And they made some changes, not a whole lot of changes to what they initially published, but there are some significant changes. And so I want to talk about that final rule and what it means and what it doesn't mean, because you know, as you know, with the Osage Mineral Estate, we have the 1906 Act, and importantly, we have 1906 Act amendments that make our situation much different than any other tribe in America when it comes to our legal infrastructure and the fact that we've got a tribally owned mineral estate, and the money goes to head right holders who are Indians and non-Indians and non-humans and all that kind of stuff. So, and the nature of our lands is different, but so I want to talk about what the terror rule is and what it is not, importantly. And by the way, I want to say that I've got my colleague Abby Fain from my office here and David Mullen, who does work for the nation through the Office of the Chiefs here, and they want to, I prefer to have a conversation about this, so if there's something you have a question about as we go along, just to engage, or legal counsel if you have something you want to say, just feel free to kind of jump in here, because we can go and do Q&A at the end, but if there's something that you really want to know about as we go along, it's probably better just to go ahead and just jump in. Also, we want to talk about the application that we have more information about now, that we have a final rule about what's in that application, what you can apply for. For the Osages, what I don't think the 1906 Act allows for us to assume from the government. And by the way, I think that's really handling money. I don't think the 1906 Act allows us to take deposits, invest money, and distribute to head right holders. And I'm not sure you'd want to do that anyway, right? That's a mess. That there's no real utility, and I don't know that federal law allows that anyway. But again, that's one of these things with the 1906 Act we need to work through. Off-ramps. When I refer to off-ramps, I mean throughout the rule, even if you're approved, there's numerous opportunities to say, wait a second, this is not going as we thought. We want to take the off-ramp and decide we're not going to do this. So if you decide to apply, or we're, at this point, the Minerals Council is reaching out to the chiefs and the Congress to say, we cannot do this by ourselves. Under our Osage Nation law, these are an agreement with the federal government like this would need the Congress and the chiefs and the Minerals Council to work together to create some legal infrastructure to do this. But along the way, there's this process, these processes that the more we learn, the more we get into it, we can say, this isn't a good fit for us, decide we're not going to do it. So we'll talk a little bit more about the off-ramps, and then the roles and decisions that you as leaders of the Osage Nation have to make. Because the role of the Minerals Council and the Osage Constitution and authorities under the 1906 Act obviously is different than the role of the Office of the Chiefs, is different than the role of the Congress in this. And so what role would each body play? And again, that's for conversation. I think I've got a pretty good idea of it, but we need to, this is just a first step towards this. So there may be parts of this that I'm not right about, but I think I have a sense of where we probably want to go. Okay. And then uncertainties. I mean, right now, I think one reason the Minerals Council has said we want to explore this is because there's a lot we don't know yet that we would learn in the pre-application consultation process. So I'll get a little bit more into that. Anything I'm not on here as part of the discussion that you'd like to talk about or think about? Yes, sir.
On the off-ramp part of this would be something if we were to take over a function, and then we decided this isn't gonna work for us for whatever reason, whether we feel like we're not capable of doing it or we decided we just don't want to do it. if I remember right, at our July 11th consultation, when they rolled this out in Tulsa, did they not say, or some of the language say, that it would be negotiated for us to give it back?
Well, I think that the rule is more clear about whatever they said at that time. So there is now a very specific procedure. If we said, okay, say we decide to take over leasing. Well, we're already doing leasing, right, in many ways, but the process, and one reason I think it's motivating the Minerals Council, again, to be corrected here, is that we have so much inefficiency at the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So many things that we're dealing with that has really put a stranglehold on production here because the regulatory environment we have. So the price of oil has not been that bad. It's been that we've got new rules and new decisions that have been made involving American Bearing Beetle and the, this draft EIS. There's, these proposed regulations. There's been a lot of controversy about those. Any number of things that are making getting well records from the government, anything that we talked about, there's a list of things that are making it more difficult in our kind of older field here to get to greater production, and it's hurting our headright holders. So with regard to your specific question, there's now more specifics about how to do that. Without a doubt, if the Minerals Council, the nation, the Congress together decided, or one part of us decided, I think, we decided to take over leasing, that was a bad idea. We can turn it back over to the government, right? So you've got, our initial on-ramp, which is deciding we're actually going to do it, and then there's off-ramps even after you get an approval. And in fact, because the trust responsibility is still there, if they decide we are causing some harm to the mineral estate, they can come back in and reassume whether we like it or not.
Correct.
So, okay, yes.
I think the Congress, ought to be advised that we council members are pretty familiar with around the corner of the BIA office, that it's not that so much that they're incompetent. It's just that they are understaffed and underfunded. And one thing that is really important for us to consider if we were to take over some of these functions, that we would need proper funding and proper and sufficient staff to undertake any one of these functions.
Thank you. All right, the new rule, generally speaking, what it does, it says, we're going to put procedures in place where a tribe, and of course our circumstance, the Osage Nation, we could go to the federal government and negotiate some agreement about what a law would look like that would allow us to assume the current BIA activities of minerals mining leases, right, oil and gas, other minerals. We could assume business agreements, and business agreements is defined very broadly under the rule, meaning joint ventures, permits, all kinds of things that we could decide we want to assume that they go into. And rights of way, which is basically pipelines, other things where infrastructure is in place. We could decide we would be the entity that manages that, okay? So this law, the reason, and I've heard many times that it's true that there's not a single tribe in the country that's taken advantage of this terror under the old law, because they created a set of laws that made it unrealistic, irrational to do it, right? It did not make any sense for a tribe to do it. So the Congress passed amendments to that law that now put us in this new world we're in. And now, as of December of last year, we've got new regulations that put some more meat on the bones of that law. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. The other thing that's important about this is that the new law is based upon the Hearth Act. Now, the Hearth Act is a law that the Osage Nation has already enacted that basically says when it comes to business leases on trust or restricted lands within the Osage, instead of having to get BIA approval of every single one, We get one law approved and we can do it on our own. The government has to approve our law, and we have to negotiate. It's got to meet all sorts of standards, federal standards. But once that's approved, we do it without federal approval of each one. Right? So particularly in the context of oil and gas development, that has advantages that we'll talk about. We think it could be a significant efficiencies there. With the Hearth Act, you already have that in place, and as a result of it, you've already created the legal infrastructure for environmental reviews. The Department of Natural Resources, my understanding, is that you have already created that infrastructure that would be relevant to environmental reviews that cause a ton of heartache over here. So every time under federal law, under NEPA, it triggers these environmental requirements because you've got federal officials taking care of these things. If we can redirect that to a tribal official, we think there could be significant efficiencies there. Right? Yes, sir.
Wilson, the Hearth Act environmental review is done by our Department of Natural Resources. That is very small compared to this process. This process is going to require, I think it's been mentioned by Councilman Rebar, what funds are available for Osage Nation to do the environmental review duties. So that's a starting point. I just want to make sure everyone knows that even though that office, Osage Department of Natural Resources, is capable, for now, we're need a lot more if we go this way. We just need to identify them.
Now, funding too is going to be a major point here on whether or not we do this at all, right? So we now you can get access to federal funds through 638 to assume some of these functions, but we don't know how much that is. That's one of the major uncertainties that could be a barrier to deciding we're going to do this at all, right? And so, but I think the environmental reviews part of that is the primary point that says, if we think about minerals, and I've heard a lot of people, I'm this way too. Within Osage government, you think minerals council, right? They do minerals, and that's it, right? If we get involved in that, we get into constitutional problems. And other natural resources, that's the chiefs and the Congress, the law creating body of the Congress, the executive branch. But I think you have to unsilo your thinking. It's a little bit different here. If we do decide to do a TERA, one of those efficiencies, I think, is part of it would be Congress creating laws relating to environmental reviews so we can avoid the processes we have to go through at the BIA. They're inefficient. And so part of that process would be probably the Minerals Council handling most of the leasing or other obligations, but the environmentals would probably still be done by the Department of Natural Resources. Again, this is all for discussion. There's nothing, this is where I think we're going, but this is for you to decide. But as the chief mentioned, that is a limited resource entity. So when I say there's legal infrastructure there, under the Hearth Act, it's been created, but it doesn't mean you're flexing that muscle all the time like you would be if you're doing leasing. Am I right in saying that?
So can I ask a question about that? So if our Department of Natural Resources were to do the environmental review for us on that, we would still have to follow the same guidelines as the
Bureau of Indian
Federal
Affairs.
government.
what's the act? The
NEPA.
NEPA.
Yeah, we'd still have to follow those guidelines. We'd have to stay in step with those, correct?
No, that's not correct. I would say it'd be
How is-
NEPA-like, right? So our process that we have now under the Hearth Act is NEPA-like, right? So it doesn't mean we're taking that federal law and we're doing it. We're creating Osage sovereign law
That's correct.
And we're doing it under the sovereignty of the Osage Nation. And what the TERA does, it says, we're approving that. And so we're saying, you can do this yourself. But it's not taking all the NEPA itself and all the interpretations of that statute and moving it into, we're just handling something for, it's just, we're not taking NEPA and Osageizing it, so to speak. We're creating an Osage sovereign law, and they're saying, if you do that, and meets these minimum requirements, we're gonna let you do that without having triggered NEPA, because you don't have a federal official doing it. And I might ask David to comment on this, because I know he's.
So does the TERA Act actually say that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I would say it does not say that
Yeah.
in those terms. It doesn't say you don't have to. Now, this is in the rest of the white world, right? You have organizations and entities within the Congress, within the whole world that are focused on protecting NEPA, right? That's Democrats, right? That's Natural Resources Committee. Or that is Energy Committee. The Democrats that are on there are there to protect these environmental laws. So here, I think there's a way of the reason, and then there's a whole group of Americans that are trying to get around NEPA because it's so onerous, right?
I agree.
So we think this is part of that as a way of saying, with the federal approval of our rules, you no longer have the same trigger of NEPA of a federal official taking an action that causes NEPA to kick in.
Second chair, I'd like to hear from second chair first.
Thank you, Chair. This is a sticking point. When I look at this, I try to figure out, and maybe I'm getting hung up on primacy. A lot of times we've looked at taking over federal functions before, and it's always been as long, you can take these over, but you can't make them less stringent. They gotta be exactly the same. A lot of times we take state laws and we'll completely plagiarize them and put in our names, you know. So this is something that I'm not sure that I agree. I think that when it's all said and done, we're still gonna have NEPA that we have to follow completely exactly like the federal.
Well, here's what I want, if I could, because this is a really important part of all this, if I can tell you, we worked at the Indian Affairs Committee at the time. He's talked about this and said, this was kind of why they were doing it, was to avoid NEPA kicking in. That was the conversation within Congress. So I don't want to misrepresent what you were saying, I'll just let you.
Sure, that's correct. The whole concept behind this act and the Hearth Act and the original act that started this whole trend is NEPA avoidance. It avoids the application of NEPA to these approval processes. And it started in 2000, the year 2000, when the first federal act that created something that is almost identical to what is now called the Hearth Act for just Navajo Nation, for surface leasing on Navajo Nation in the year 2000. And they designed it it was designed by, the lead staffer on it was Mike Connor, who eventually became Deputy Secretary of the Interior. It took a federal official out of the decision-making process, and that ends NEPA right there, because you do not have NEPA unless you have a federal official approving a lease, approving a activity.
Excuse me, the only difference between that and the Navajos and us is that the Navajos own the surface. That's the reservation where Osage, the subsurface, the mineral estate, is our federal reservation.
Well,
And I bring it up because we got beat once trying to take primacy on some of our environmental laws. And when I pointed that out to my director then, I said, that's Navajo regulations. She said, oh, no, it isn't. And then she got out the Navajo regulations. She said, you're right. It's what we got beat on. But we were claiming surface.
right,
All of Osage County was a reservation. Well, surface, no. Subsurface, yes.
right. Well, actually, Navajo owns both the surface and the subsurface.
Correct, I agree.
But
Not the whole reservation, though. No, Mexico's a lot.
You know, there's a allotted part over in the eastern edge of Navajo. But I was just mentioning the Navajo Act because that was the original structure of the bill, which was to remove from Navajo decision-making a federal official. And so they eventually adopted their own version of the Hearth Act. Then comes the Hearth Act in 2012. And that is surface leasing for all tribes, one of which is Osage Nation. That has the Hearth Act, which is just like the Navajo Act, but for all tribes in the United States. And so that was adopted for the same reason, to eliminate the leasing approval process involving a federal official, a BIA official, as approving the lease. When the lease is approved by a non-federal official, NEPA does not apply. It only applies if a federal official is making the decision.
Does the CFRs apply?
Yeah.
Under a Hearth?
Under the Hearth Act, yes, the CFRs are going to apply, but right now, if we have a TERA and there's a new CFRs for oil and gas or other,
Amendments.
production, there's going to have to be something in there that says, unless you adopt a TERA. Right? There's going to have to be something that says, this is the federal rules and how all of the minerals production in the Osage will be carried out. But if you have an approved TERA, it will be an exception to that.
Well, the reason I bring this up, if we were to do it, Tara, and it would be in such conflict with the CFRs that we'd almost have to write our own set of regulations. Do you envision us doing that?
You mean?
To govern the operations of the leasing and the activities,
I think
like
that's
the CFRs do?
That's been done in the TERA regulations.
I'd like to hear the chief.
I was just going to point out, the TERA is CFR.
Thank
It's a
you.
federal law signed by the President of the United States, passed by the House, passed by the Senate, and here's proposed CFRs.
So 226 is no longer in effect?
No, it is still there, 226 is still there, but now you've got 224, which is TERA, that says, here's the rules unless you do a TERA.
Okay.
Right? And if I could just address one thing that Vice Chairman said about the difference between Osage and Navajo. What this regulation specifically says, it defines tribal land. Right? This isn't about jurisdiction. Right? Jurisdiction's different. Like if you want to go into downtown Pawhuska and you're on fee land and there's a question whether we've got the bad court decisions that say we have jurisdiction over a crime that any commits there, right? But what it says is it defines tribal land in the TERA regulation as any land or interest in land, which includes minerals, and I think here, owned by a tribe or tribe's title which is held in trust by the United States. Now, specifically, if you read and this is in your books, when they published the final rule, we asked a specific question about that. Does that interest in land apply to the Osages and the Osage mineral estate? So for purposes of a TERA, under a TERA regime, is the surface and the subsurface joined? And they said yes. Yes. Doesn't mean we have jurisdiction, right? Doesn't mean we can exercise civil and criminal jurisdiction. But for purposes of business agreements, leasing, and rights of way, under an approved TERA, I think it means we have authority. And by the way, and so this is all brand new. This is different than whatever decisions were made then about environmental primacy. We're under a new federal law here that changes that. So I'm sorry, there's been a number of hands. And I don't know, Chairman, if you want to go in order, I don't want to.
Yes, but I'd like to hear from Councilman Redcorn.
Thank you, Chair. I want to apologize. I'm having a hard time hearing, but I wanted to acknowledge Mr. Mullen. I appreciate what you're pointing out. I agree, and I've read, we've been a part of this. Mr. Pipestem is bringing this to the whole governing entity of the nation, and appreciate that. I've talked to Council or Congresswoman Stabler about this previously. I'm all in favor of the tariff. I think the discussion should be directed toward, let's get it moving. So I did talk to Ms. Stabler once, and I said, what do we need to do? What does Congress need to do? And I think what I'm hearing is we just need a resolution to ask the executive to act and start the tariff process. But I'm not sure, I'm not an attorney, and I'm wondering if that's the same thing we need from Congress too. Is that what you were saying to me previously?
I was saying, I just knew that there would have to be some kind of documents that would start this. I don't know what that is. I don't know what the process is for certain.
I know Dave and I had this conversation about will a resolution do it, or do we need new tribal law? And I think the answer is we need new tribal law.
Yeah.
I think we can't just do the Congress resolving. We have to create tribal law that will allow for this to happen.
So, we need an approval from the Mineral Council.
Oh, yeah, I mean, and I'll get into what I think the Constitution says about this. I don't think so if the chiefs and the Congress said, we're gonna do a tariff without the Minerals Council, I think you're gonna lose a constitutional challenge to that, right? The Minerals Council has authority. Not that you've even suggested that, right? I'm just talking about structured law. If you said, we wanna do a tariff for wind and solar, I think you could do it without the Minerals Council.
I don't.
Okay, that's all right. We're all just talking. Chairman, order of business. Comments?
I'd like to go to Councilwoman Foreman, who had her hand up just a minute ago,
Um,
on topic.
Right, well, this is on the CFR, and this is not getting into the weeds, it's just an example for clarification. One CFR says that if a lease is terminated, if a lease is terminated, for non-production, then in 90 days you have to plug the wells. Well, we have situations where we have viable commercial wells that have, for one reason or another, that are legitimate reasons, have not been produced or not produced enough. And we have very good commercial wells that are being plugged. If we did our own tariff, would we still be subject to that CFR?
No, if we include that part within our regulations, right?
Okay.
See, if we're taking up now, here's the other thing about a tariff, is if we say we just want to take leasing, we don't want to take rights away, we don't want to take other business agreements, we can do that. We can pick and choose. I think we could even say, we just want to do leasing in the Burbank. I think we might be able to do that. Now, that may mess up the federal funding we get, right? Because once you start saying, well, there's an employee over here, that's $100,000, you're only taking a quarter of that. So it may mess up our ability to, that may make the equation on funding more difficult.
Yep.
But I think you're basically taking over these authorities that are being run by the PI, including those decisions. I mean, that becomes more of a discretionary act of the Minerals Council.
I do have one effort, wipe off Navajo. I was with Alfred Yazzie and Joe Saul from the Navajo Nation in 2000. Do not look at any of this reflective of any other tribe. Just forget about all that. It's a waste of time. What we need to hear is exactly right. The federal law has to be implemented into your TERRA or TIDO that will be accepted. And you cannot go at a lesser rate. We looked at the primacy that Second Chair's talking about. I think you have, and this is gonna be it, and we're gonna steal his thunder a little bit. March 18th is when the government's gonna send us a letter and the nation inherit federal function that answers all these questions. If it's not allowed, then no, we don't do it. But Council, go right ahead.
Just a quick comment, I mean.
And then Councilwoman Gray.
Oh, is it me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I started on the minerals years ago. The conversation's changed. I've got a lot of headrod holders can't pay their bills. Can't get their electric bill or water bill. And when you can't pay your bills, you really gotta look at doing business a little bit differently. I think we're leaving a lot of revenue on the table We've shut down drilling because of the process that's going on over there from what we had to almost nothing. It's terrible. And I think we Osages can do better than sitting around waiting for somebody from some other tribe or not even an Indian tell us we can or cannot do production or development. So I think, to me, the conversation's changed. We've got to explore and get our asset moving for the benefit of our shareholders, because I do get those calls. You know, I can't make my bills. People with head rights and you know, this is a serious business. I think it's time we act. We can't talk about it anymore. We gotta do this. It's our right. Federal law gives that power to us. We have a lot of smart people involved in oil and gas now. I think we can do it.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Wayne.
Yeah, you know, I think that this is a great way to find common ground within our Constitution, where we have Congress, we're working within with the lawmaking part that we need. Currently, we don't have any oil and gas laws. And then, you know, my colleague was exactly right. We get calls, every single one of us, every day, and, you know, including our family. They're having a tough time. So we have to look at this mineral state with new eyes. And while we're all elected officials today, and this Terra has come into play, it is absolutely an opportunity. Now, are we saying, I know that, you know, my colleague across the way here says, let's just get to it and sign it. I want to get there, but I also know that there's processes and education and where everyone is comfortable and understands the law of what is in this. How is this going to impact us? And I agree with Chairman. Other tribes are already putting their pre-application in. And one of the things that we did, I guess last month, it was last month, is we sent a letter to the chief, just so you all know that we are requesting to do the pre-application. It doesn't mean we're gonna, you know, like I think our council said that there's, you know, if we don't like it, if this ain't for us, then that's fine. It doesn't say that we still can't get into business, but it also says that there's some functions over here that have been, it's just not that important to them as it is to our producers, and at the end of the day, it's our shareholders, and that, you know, our updated numbers. We used to always say, well, there's 5,000 shareholders. No, there's 7,500. That's a lot of people that are in need of asking all over the country, do I gotta go back to work? Do I gotta do this and make these difficult decisions, who are later in life, who have enjoyed, you know, the mineral state. But we also know the factor in is we've always got 20%. 20% royalty, probably pretty average across the board. If we are able to do this and work at business laws, oil and gas laws, how do we do this? We're not saying we're gonna do this year. It's going to take a lot of time for all of us to be educated and how we can get this up and going. So when we do hopefully launch this, that will be with the understanding that these are our roles, these are your roles, and this is the chief's roles of how we get there. And I think it would be, instead of making 20%, we have, once we have overhead, there's an opportunity for us to make 60 to 75%, somewhere around there. We'll have to do those numbers to really look at it. That's what will be going to our shareholders. That is a vast improvement. And I know, I was bringing this up, I used to work summer youth up here when Norma Jean Mays and your dad was here, and different chiefs across the, throughout that. And I remember that they're saying, BIA, they're gonna take care of us, and that's just the way it is, and we couldn't get into business. Well, we have a highly educated tribe. I mean, I don't know if you all, I think you all know that, but we have. And I believe that we have the brain power, and now we know what we can do. And I think that this is something that we could be highly successful at.
Thank
And I just want to say that because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to get to as we go through these rules, these new laws, and luckily, we have some of these things already in place. We have an environmental, we need to ramp it up in order for it to do that. There's some things that need to happen, so thank you for allowing those comments.
So one of the most important parts about this is the new regulation restates what's in the statute. This isn't just in regulation. When it comes to the Secretary's trust responsibility, because I know that's a concern among head right holders. Trust me, they've been in here to let us know. Let them know, I just get to sit over here and it's not so bad, right? But head right holders are concerned, oh, you're gonna break the trust. It's just not what the law says, right? That is just not what the law says. In fact, if say we take over leasing, somebody violates a lease, what the regulation specifically says is the secretary is still on the hook to bring a lawsuit against them as trustee. They have to follow our rule and enforce. Right? So, and by the way, I will say I understand the concern of head right holders who have that view. I understand that. And so going into this, I think the Minerals Council has been very careful and deliberate about saying, okay, this trust that's created by the 1906 Act and amendments and how it's formed over the years, that's to be protected. The Constitution demands it of all of you, whether you like it or not. You're demanded to do that under Osage law. And so I think this TERA preserves that. The mineral estate is going to stay in trust. They're going to continue to have obligations, but it does allow assumption of some of these BIA functions. The only area that's different, and this is important, is if this Minerals Council under a TERA sits down, and I've mentioned this before, if they say, okay, we want 20%, the other side says, no, we want 15%, they say, okay, we got a deal. And turns out they got a really good deal, we should have got 20%. We can't sue the government because we made a bad decision. And by the way, it's my own view, having sued the government for 11 years, that those are not the kind of things you can, actually sue the government for with any effectiveness. They have to make mistakes under this agreement for to be able to go sue the government and be in the Court of Federal Claims for a long time to try to get money. But you cannot say, okay, we reached a deal on a term, negotiate a term, and then sue the government and we say, yeah, we made a stupid decision. We wouldn't be able to do that under this rule. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you,
Chief Councilman Reddick, after you, brother.
for, Mr. Pipestone. I have been looking at this TERA, since probably 2012. And there are a lot of major changes. And one that has really worried me about us entering into a TERA, I'm seeing language in here, and you just went over that language, and I want to make sure that I'm hearing this correct. This does not allow the Bureau of Indian Affairs off the hook for previous land damages over the past
122 years.
I do not believe it changes that. We have been dealing with questions. Do you mind if I talk a little bit about this?
We need to talk about this specific item because it's going to be a rollout of the other concern, and I think our Congress has this too. We're kind of getting away from what we need to do. What we're trying to do is we lost 47% of our production. There is no other question here for us. You might get this viability of let's look at the law and everything else. We're getting those calls. Some of these are your people, and that's why I'm just thinking this question has to be talked about right now. Go ahead, sir.
Just very quickly on the question Congressman Bayhorse just raised about obligations of the federal government in the past. When you say we enter into a TERA a year from now, because that's what we're looking at. We move quickly, we're talking about a year. Okay? So there are questions, say we're plugging wells, right?
That's correct.
We've got grants for that, and under 638, it's clear they continue to have liability. But there are some places where they're trying to be sheepish with us about, oh, no, they're kind of, and we're trying to understand that so we make sure we don't make a mistake there about environmental liability. But I think the answer now, the TIRA does not change that. TIRA does not change that. Okay.
May I add one thing real quick? Thank you, Chief, for helping us with our council, our Orphan Well Committee. Folks keep talking about what we're doing with the 638, we'll never do that. That is exactly what we're doing. We have a MIFA agreement over this federal dollars that I went and got on behalf of the council. And then this council has went ahead with the program, and the only thing we got complaints about sticker shock, as you well know. But we have taken on that responsibility of Orphan Well without having the federal government relieved of any of their obligations. Personally, 19 years ago, I filed the suit against them. I'm never gonna quit doing that. They are wrong. And with your help, we can stabilize this with all of us. Go ahead, brother. Councilman, ready, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues, you know. I've heard some statements in the last several months, really, that we had 400 producers in the Osage County that producing oil, operating wells, and that's down to 100. That's how drastic it is. As our head right holders can see, the status of the checks, you know. But what I really what brings to mind with me with the tariff, however long it's gonna take, you know. Let's just say we take over the leasing, you know, which we approved leases already. But there's also a lot of land work out there, up and out the Bill Land Park there. This is a big county, believe me, it is one big county. And there's a lot to that. And are they gonna give us enough money to operate through this whole thing? You know, and just say March 18th is the deadline, and we decide to take over the leasing, and that involves going out to the field and talking to the landlord and everything else. How long will that take to give us that money? And according to what this council has seen so far, they haven't even brought out the new regulations yet. How is that going to affect, you know, this new tariff? If it does, if it does not. I don't know.
Well, so
I'm worried about the funding.
Right.
I'm always worried about it.
The funding, in my mind, is a big question mark that we have to answer through the pre-application consultation process. We don't know, I don't know the answer to that. My guess is they're gonna try to do what they do in a 638 negotiation and say, no, that money's not available. You know, we've got to try to see what that number is. If they say we've got $2 for leasing, we may decide that this is not worth it. We've got to look for other solutions. I mean, I don't know. But part of it I want to encourage, and one of the, do you all have this? If you don't have this, briefing materials that we handed out, I'll ask Abby to hand that out. But what we have drafted here that's not been sent to my knowledge is, you see there's a tab that says, that's a draft letter. This is tab under the tab that says pre-application consultation request. It's a draft letter that to the Secretary of the Interior, this is under the new regulation, that would say, we want to sit down and have this consultation with you. Here's a list of things we'd like to talk to you about. And we want to understand these issues better, including funding. Now, one of the things I think that would be most valuable, I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but since we're talking about it, this pre-application consultation process, my hope is that, I think there's a lot of us, I'll say me too, that whatever goes on over here when it comes to a lease or a permit to drill or decisions that are made, we think there's an oil and gas guru over there that's making some, you know, exercising some discretion in a way that in the best interest of the Osages and the head right holders, and they're so smart we could never do that. I think if we take the mystery out of that and say, okay, let's talk about leasing. We sign a lease, we send it to you, exactly what do you do? What operating procedures do you follow? then we'll be able to see what that is and what kind of checklist they have to go through, how they make decisions, and then we will have in this process, I hope, a much better knowledge of when they're just checking the box on things they're doing, or when they're actually exercising discretion in a way where we feel like we can adequately do that ourselves. My expectation, to be honest with you, is a lot of those discretionary actions that they're taking are not magic. But we'll find out. I think that's what this process is. Now, for those of you who worked at the BIA and know about what goes on over there, you know a lot better than I do. But I get the impression that there is not some sort of super knowledge over there about everything we do that is just overwhelming for us to try to do that. Yes.
Chairman. I have a comment about that. The one thing, and we've discussed this before, is that Bureau of Indian Affairs around the corner, they do not have a vested interest in the outcome of any of this. They don't have a dog in the fight, really. They, like you said, they're just doing their function, answering to somebody above them, trying to stay out of trouble, you know, CYA kind of stuff. But they don't have a vested interest as to whether or not we increase production or not. It doesn't affect their bottom line in any way. But for Congress to know also, I think, is that if we were to enter into a TERRA or a TITO, it's not necessarily the Mineral Council is going to just take over all that and have the 8 of us run that. We will be putting together a staff with highly qualified professionals, and some of them may come at pretty big salaries.
They're vetted.
We may need to relocate to an office area to encourage good qualified people. And not necessarily in this building. And so it won't be just us Mineral Council members trying to take over what they're doing. It would be a staff.
Yes, sir.
Maybe something similar to the Oklahoma commissioners of the land office. They have a similar size operation as what we've got. And they
Second
have-
chair and then Councilman Redcorn. Second.
That,
Thank you, sir.
that brings up a lot of confusion on my part, or questions. Because I'm wondering, if we enter into this agreement, who's gonna carry it through? Will it be a department with the nation, or will it be the Minerals Council?
Well, let me tell you what I think the answer to that is. I think, and again, this is all for discussion and your decisions on this. My sense of it is that Congress has the obligation to pass law related to this. That the chief's office, I think, through the executive branch and the Department of Natural Resources would be doing the environments. Then the other functions related to actual oil and gas stuff, minerals work, would be done under the auspices of the Minerals Council. And how you decide that, how that administration would work is to be determined. But, you know, creation of hiring people and creating, I think that's the general outlines of how it would work, but that's why we have to work together. The Minerals Council is saying in no uncertain terms that based on the desperate situation we find ourselves in when it comes to minerals development, that working together with the other, you know, the political branches of Osage government, we have to do this together or we can't do it.
Councilman Redcorn, then Chief Standing Bearer. Chief, go right ahead, sir.
David Mullen and I talked about that very thing this weekend, and I agree completely. I would just add that the nation would continue to provide HR support, accounting, payroll, IT on the indirect cost charge. And that's just a relatively simple matter, so there would be no disruption. We'd just be able to fit in that way.
Councilman Redcorn, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to comment as far as the nation goes. I mean, the way I read the Constitution, I'm always up for somebody teaching me. The way I see it is we approve leases and we look for other forms of development. And all the rest of this stuff, we've got a government that handles. That's just my one of a. So I think it's clear we have the documentation to move forward with the tariff. My second point I'd like to point out is we paid for some of our members to go to NCAI. And if that document is in here, I appreciate that, Mr. Pipestem, but we have full support from the National Congress of American Indians in our pursuit not only to exploit or explore resource development, which is kind of conducive to most tribes, but they're also interested in allowing us to go for the traditional oil and gas stuff too. So they kind of backed up their general stance to allow for traditional and critical oil and gas development and recognize the Osage Nation to be able to do that. I think that's a very powerful statement among our Native people, that the issue is not so much politics, it's more sovereign right to go after a real estate aspect of what we own under our own guide and our own development. And the way we see it, prioritize. So I think I just want to point that out. I appreciate you putting that in there. I don't know if you had any comments on that, Mr. Green.
You know, one of the things when we were out there last November or October, around that time,
Quickly.
it was with the support of 3 Congress members, Angela Pratt, or Congresswoman Pratt, Stabler, and Good Fox. They were in the room and they followed, and I mean, we all hung together, and we represented Osage very well at that event. And I say event, but it is a congressional process, and it could have failed in the first reading, it could have failed in the second reading, it could have never even made it out of committee, it could have gotten tabled. And you know, we hung in there, and I really appreciate our legal counsel who knows our 1906, who knows our, the process over at NCI, and knows that this Terra is, this is right where we're at. But we got the full support of, the other 400 nations who were there. And, people, and I'm talking, we are in a room of climate changers, but they understood one thing, that this was this was our natural resource. This was, they can't say how we do stuff because they were wanting us to be supportive of theirs. But it's because of our sovereignty, of our natural resources, is why they supported it. And these are, I'm talking about dreadlock, wool-looking hat, climate changers, and they said, that's Osage's sovereignty, and we're gonna support it.
Man,
And that was powerful. It really was. So, it got to the full floor, and we didn't have no problems. It got passed on through.
Thank you. I'd like the floor for a second. The other issue is exactly that. We have done the due diligence on it. The question arises, is it nation, is it council? We're going to have to ask our Congress and our nation 2 things. If we do a grant, any kind of effort with you, a MIFA, which is a multi-year funding agreement, of course it falls under the nation. But we are going to have to ask you for the credence of allowing us the leasing under the nation so we can correctly give it right back to you to permit it. The primacy has already been reviewed since I was sitting in this room with right after the chief. And what it looks at is, the second chair has brought it up, we got to set this bar up high. We can ask for it, they have to deliver it. And I hate to go against my brother Pipestem, but the reason I went no, because of this ownership. you're going to get tested by the state of Oklahoma in federal court. We're gonna stand behind you, and every person that goes against you, a landowner, has an abstract that states we're there first. And we want to supply that to you, and we're ready to go anytime you are. We gotta take a break. We don't do this regularly, but let's take 5 minutes. And with that, 10-minute break. Well, I didn't get a chance to look at Mark. I said, man, you have literally flew in, landed. It's had your guy go.
Hello. Doing well. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm for
No worries. I almost have all you. Good walk. Good thing. Good thing she wasn't here.
For which,
One of my favorite trees.
Yeah.
No, they're getting ready to sell it. If they lose it.
So is anybody even thought about how
What's your executive?
Thank you. That last one.
Trying to release some of their most godforsaken land, which I think is a
Yeah, I did. That's
Yeah, me too.
Yes, I just asked them, I was like, find out what it's right now. Thank you. Thank you.
okay, well, maybe it was Sam. Well, he was dead too, but not very good. Okay, then we talk about.
Let me call and tell them it's not good.
Thank you for. Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead, I was curious. Please, you saw around. Yeah, I'm used to it. And so this other guy gets up and he starts the same thing.
Hello, Cecilia.
How are you?
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good. But anyway, so their general counsel, not only they call, try to regulate their.
You know, she did that. She is.
But they have a resolution in the house. No, please resort it. And then there's Timo, who, they're crazy as girls.
Yeah, well, you know, I was involved in the final, distribution wire that Harry Reid was pushing for years. I was out there, most vocal.
They talk about it, crazy. And then, well, there's, you ready to pass the law school? Now, I have no term for that. And
I think I have.
And so I have some land that says. I mean, I could go home right now. Oh my gosh, that's great. No, but in that area. It's guys writing comparison. It's just like that.
It's in the package. I need a
It's the craziest thing I've ever seen, because it'll be like a mobile home, and it's like a little family room, so then they add on a tractor trailer. And then they'll add on. It was just crazy housing. So there will be, so, like, really should start.
And we need to have a lot more technology.
In trust or just, it's yours?
Interest. It'll be interest. But a market did not remember that. And their government often they also have to. So. And half of them are here.
Well, I'm not, I'm really.
So I didn't want to divorce, so I sent her said, show me her.
Well, that's what, that's the absolute forefront.
Other side is jumping, oh, yeah, they are jealous. We don't. So where's the? Well,
That's right.
they did they figure out. We're the different board. Let me just go and take a picture, I mean, I know, and I got to say, we got bronchitis after that. Sit down.
sit down.
You know, the clothes do feel good when you got them like that.
Hey, good. Good to see you.
It does help us out.
Well, I mean, you have to like fly out there and it's
In fact, I was going pineapple upside down cake.
It was so good. Yes, it was very good.
He goes, Mom, you gotta get her to help me. I'm trying to do it.
All right.
Here's the secret ingredients. I said, I
Yeah,
just keep mixing. He goes, are you sure?
no, we tore it up. April and I had everybody about that. Everybody had it.
We'll take a minute. Yes. We sat there together, and I'm not forgetting none of that, because that is the nation's history.
Got that now.
Yes, sir.
I would just like to see if there's some comments.
Yes.
Oh, we're ready to go.
Okay. All right, well, while I'm sitting here listening to this, and like I said, I have some of my own thoughts about how this can transition out. But what I hear a lot of we assume, and that is the state you have to be at right now because nobody really knows. So you have to take this opportunity and this year to investigate those things. I started thinking about this 20 years ago when I worked there and what I could see that was wrong and what we could have done better. And I think you have a great opportunity here to spend a year, not just planning, which you have to do. You've got to create the plan you're going to go to, but you need to fully understand what every desk does over there and the reason they do it and how they follow it. And it could be that you can do it for a lot better. Well, I know you can do it for more efficiencies, but maybe you can do it for less staff. You know, you've got to find these things out. And so that's why I'm in favor of this and encouraging this, because I think that you need to get a grasp, even if you decide not to take it. That learning time and that ability to understand that is great for Minerals Council. It's great for Congress too. And I just think that there are some divisions there. I think the ultimate goal, I know we're talking about little businesses and government businesses and outside businesses and minerals businesses and stuff, and that's all going to come out of this discussion that goes on. But the main thing is, the bottom line is to increase the headline, to increase the production and increase the headline. So if you keep that as your main goals, I think you can easily make a plan, because that's what it is. It's going to be a business plan in the end. And like I said, on the 364th day, you may decide, we're not going there. But you'll at least have more knowledge for doing it. So this time period of this year is not anything to fear. It's an opportunity, and I think every tribe should take it and then decide. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Council. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman Waller. I want to say thank you to everybody who took some time out of their day to come here. And I do appreciate the invite, and this is government working together. So it's nice to see there's been some progression from where we were at the last meeting. I believe it was last spring. So what I'm taking from the short time that that we've been here for the 1 hour is that there's a lot of uncertainty. And sometimes we're gripped by fear when we have uncertainty, and we let that guide our decisions at times. The majority of us as human beings, we do use fear as a determinant on which way we're going to go with a direction or not. But I see this as an opportunity to ask a lot of questions, and I feel that we don't know what we don't know. So we can have all these questions, but we can get into the pre-application process and ask those questions. And in the pre-application process, we can still back out, even if we get to a certain point. And then up to what Second Speaker Saylor was saying, we can back out at any time and give it back. So I am excited to see the progressiveness that's going on here. I stole my mom's word. That's the word that she used. But this is exciting, and it's an opportunity not just for our mineral estate, it's an opportunity for the entire nation. And for you all to be willing to come and work with us and us with you, this is exciting, and I hope that we continue to go down this path, and I hope that you send the letter out about the pre-application, because I'm absolutely in support of it, because I don't feel there's anything wrong with asking questions, and a lot of them. Thank you.
Okay, so if we were to submit a TERA after, they have 270 days to approve it or not. So it creates a deadline where they have to make a decision. They can't be this law requires them to engage, requires them on that 271st day, it's approved if they don't deny it for a list of specific reasons. So, and it says those enumerated 4 reasons are up there. I'm not just going to read them to you, but you've got that information. But basically, if you say the tribe does not say we don't have capacity to do it, well, I think we've already crossed that bridge in many ways. And that this is all defined in the regulation. Most of these things would be, we're just fine. Now, a provision of terror would violate applicable federal law. Now, what do we really have to look at there? 1906 Act and amendments. I mean, sometimes I hear people say, well, there's no more 1906 Act, that's constitutional. That's just false. Those are federal laws. Those amendments apply here. So, the 1906 Act and other federal laws are applicable law, and we have to make sure, not only because we want to apply for a TARA maybe, but the Osage Constitution demands that we comply with that. That's an obligation we all have. You have to have, say there's a TARA, you approve a lease, it doesn't mean you put it in the file back here. You still got to send it to the BIA. They're still on the hook. So your TARA has to provide all this information where you're reporting back to them. They're checking on you, right? This is not cutting loose from the government, but it's us assuming authorities, providing information to them. If there's a violation of, like, as I mentioned, say there's a right-of-way, some third party violates that, the reg specifically says they have a trust obligation to enforce it, right? So there's still, it's not like the federal government's here and here's the mineral estate and there's government here and we're getting rid of them, right? They're still here. We still got to report back to them whether you like it or not. But they still have trust obligations that are created not only by the 1906 Act and other federal laws, but, you know, federal common law related to the trust, all those things still apply. Okay?
I have a question. Yes. The superintendent told me real recently, when I challenged her on why she sends out letters to the surface owners, giving them the right to appeal decisions that she makes, and she says she's required by regulation that anything that takes her action, she is required to give a 30-day notice to all interested parties. She considers the surface owners interested parties within our mineral estate operations. The fact that the federal government will have to approve this TARA, that would be an action. Would that trigger the 30-day opportunity for somebody like a surface owner to appeal our TARA application?
Well, I think there's going to be public input on all of it. We're not going to be able to do this in quiet. This is all going to be a very public process. Those landowners in the Osage are going to know about it. I think there may be an opportunity to take over that process as a part of this in managing those surface land relationships. And Drummond will not like that.
This is why I bring this up, is because I was just wondering if you expect opposition. If we were to pursue a TARA, are we going to be looking at legal challenges from maybe other parties that may have a standing?
Maybe. Say we try to take over that relationship in dealing with surface landowners. You know, they had on the draft EIS, they had a public hearing out here just a month or two back at Osage time for the holiday. And there were several landowners there. They kind of got after Councilman Redcorn for claiming this is our homeland. I remember that. And so I don't think they're going away. There's a number of existing lawsuits that's being in the Interior Board of Indian Appeals that's being handled by the Solicitor's Office. I don't think the tension between non-Indian, non-Osage landowners, surface landowners, and the Osage mineral estate is going to go away. They don't like it. There's a lot of them that don't like that they can come on your land and drill, and they're not going to like that. But managing that process may be something, and I'm not sure the answer to this, that we can take over. So I'd have to look at the 1906 Act again. But if there's some discretion there, that may be one of the things we want to take over and let them litigate in tribal court.
Yep.
Exactly.
That's one of the advantages of a TARA, is that we tribalize these processes, like in NEPA. Instead of taking all the laws and interpretations of this federal law that have gone on for a long time and have to live with them, all of a sudden we're over here in tribal court. Now that also may mean you got to plus up the budgets of your tribal court. There's a lot of reality here. Exercising sovereignty can cost money sometimes, right? can also save money, it can also create efficiencies, and can also hopefully get to higher payments for head right workers ultimately. And maybe it means more environmental protection, all those things that's what we're getting into talking about here.
Let's go to Congressman and then Councilwoman.
Which I have questions about that. I think it's wonderful to build up our tribal courts and to insert our sovereignty that way. My question is, we all know, you guys know sitting here at the table how much lawsuits cost, especially if you've been on here for a while. So what I'm hearing is that would be a function we would take on maybe through our AG's office instead of using the solicitor's office. Is that an idea that's?
I'm not sure, I don't have an answer. I wish I could be
Okay,
more,
so
I'm sorry about that, I'm just not sure the answer.
In the absence of that, the way the TARA is written, would the solicitor's office be obligated by their trust responsibility to the nation to represent us on these issues? Because lawsuits are expensive, and this mineral trust has had plenty of them.
I think it's a great question, if we could make a note about it, because what if we said, we don't want to manage those relations between surface landowners, we're going to leave it there, or we get a TARA that says, we will take care of that, but if one of the Drummonds gets upset about it, you still have to enforce. And if they say, okay, we'll approve that, then that's the way it works. We have discretion on that. That's where the negotiation is. So I don't know the answer to that, because I think it's probably, I'm not confident I know the law cold on that. Just being honest with you, and we'll have to look into that. But enforcement of, some dispute over surface land access or damages, I think that's something that could be a significant benefit to this, but I'm not ready to tell you I know the answers to all that right now.
And if I could say one thing, I'm not being negative or fearful. I just know the dollars and cents this nation has to operate on, especially with the state knocking on our door with possibly something within our gaming compact to change. So I know the dollars and cents we have. And I know that what they have over there to run this estate is inadequate, and it's just inadequate. So that's my concern as your congressperson, is the dollars and cents of it. I'm not a naysayer. I'm just trying to look at this from a realistic point of view to what I know our capabilities are currently as far as monies and dollars go. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I want to get back to the 1906, and, throughout this process of discussion, there's a part of the 1906 Act that's in its amendments. It says, and I'm not going to quote it verbatim because I don't know, I just know the gist of it, is that the federal government is not to impede any production or opportunities for business for the Osage, at the time it was Tribal Council. And so what it says is that they're not to impede anything. So we kind of held their feet to the fire on that, on the issue of the American beetle. By your own fish and wildlife laws, you put this barrier in it. So now they are looking, okay, how do we, because 1906 is an act. So they violated their own act. So as one of the things that OMC4 has worked diligently on is to remove the barriers and the challenges in order to get that drilling. We are looking at that, and right now as we speak, it's being addressed right now up in DC. So, like we said, it's going to take a while, but we also have that protection of 1906 there. We also have, the opportunity to really put Osage tribal law into effect while we work at this, because we can't be in conflict with 1906. That's just a fact. And so with TARA, I have to agree with what Congresswoman Lemon was saying, is that, we're going to have, once we get that pre-application, a lot of these issues will be discussed, talked about, researched, all these things. We're not saying this is going to happen overnight. I think everyone agrees with that. But there is an opportunity right now that I don't think we're going to have those great big lawsuit settlements coming in. We're not going to, and you just said, gaming is I feel confident about where gaming is, but, you know, that could change, federal court, we don't know. But we've got to look to diversify and work together, you know, on this. So I'm glad that, you know, you're not a complete no over there, that you're open-minded to it. And I think that's gonna be good for, as we move forward, everybody. And I just wanna thank Congresswoman Stabler for her comments, because she worked over there. She knows. So just wanted to say that about 1906.
They were getting out 480 permits that year you worked there.
Yeah.
Councilman Redcorn had 600 plus hidden there. And before we go on, that's going to be the question, and I want council to go ahead. And folks, I haven't received this. We gave it all to you at the same time we're getting it. We've been working hard to have this in this documented form. Go right ahead.
Any other questions? So as far as capacity determinations, I think we meet both criteria of that. So it's not like we've got to ramp up to be able to even apply. Okay. So opportunity for categorical exclusions, that's NEPA language that says you don't have to refine the way it is without having to make some change. The trust obligation, again, this is, there's language of this. I want to just read some of it to you. It says the act, and this is, I'm reading directly from the regulation. You've got this. It says the act that enables this regulation preserves the Secretary's trust responsibilities related to mineral and other trust resources, and requires the Secretary to act in good faith and in the best interests of Indian tribes. Neither the act nor this part, this regulation, absolves the Secretary of responsibilities to Indian tribes under the trust relationship, treaties, statutes, regulations, executive orders, agreements, or other federal law. Right? They're making crystal clear that this doesn't change that. In fact, it says the act and these regulations preserve the Secretary's trust responsibility to ensure the rights and the interests of an Indian tribe are protected if another party to a lease or a business agreement, a right-of-way under a TARA, violates any term of that agreement. So they're still saying, you enact a TARA, we still have obligations to you to help enforce against a third party. I mean, so I know this is complicated. I know some of the head right holders who've been in here express their passionate views, but I think they understandably fear the federal government's going away. This is where we're breaking the trust, right? But as I can just represent to you, and it's in your information for you to view, that's not what the law says. That's not what federal law says. It's not Osage law that we can mess up, right? This is federal law. Okay.
I might interject, that's why under this MIFA agreement that we already have with the nation on the plugging dollars, right now it's at 3.x million. We've asked for 15 more. That process right there, we're going to make sure that this gentleman protects us in that rights of the United States government still having to hold this firm as their trust responsibility. And before I forget, when Councilman Revar's talking about superintendent sending out to landowners, it used to be you only sent the letter out to the landowner you're going on. Now they've opened the door where she is sending it out to anyone interested, and I believe that's the other issue. Where did we stop being the Osages? And every abstract out there that Mr. Drummond reviews every day that his abstract office he bought, he knows more about your business than you do, states about the Minerals Council and the state. And that's why I'm just saying that any application the nation has, take us with you. We've been on every grant you've applied for anyway, I know, as villages. I help write them. The situation is not going to change none, but we will strengthen ours. And the last date you got to remember, August the 15th, 2015, we won a federal court case that stated the 1906 is on. Nothing changes it except for its amendments. And Chief and I met with Secretary Bernhardt. That's what came up at the end. And that's, with that being said, please, we have 30 minutes.
I think we've covered a lot of it, I'll keep moving. For oil and gas, the federal rule says you can only enter into a 10-year lease. Right, so it doesn't mean, okay, you do whatever you want. Again, there's federal rules here that limit tribal authority. It's 10 years for oil and gas, 30 for other agreements. This is the section that addresses, again, we can apply through 638 to try to get funding. Money is a reality in all this. We don't know the answers, and I don't think we will until we get into the pre-application consultation. Get numbers on this, then you can make rational decisions about what to do. Right.
Or not. Chief.
Now, well, let me say this. I signed, during the break, the pre-application letter that Chairman had already signed. So the letter in our package, which I saw for the first time today, but I think it's very good letter, Chairman. So I signed it, and I believe your staff has it. But pointing out, number 7 is in the letter says, we request the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or Secretary, actually Department of Interior, not the Department of Interior, to tell us their view of limitations that we shouldn't cross any lines with the 1906 Act, among other things. Well, to me, that of course we have to wait for their answer. And so I'm suggesting, because of this clause, and we have to wait for an answer, that we go ahead and proceed anyway in our work. And then the other important event Chairman mentioned was a March 18 letter, which I believe you're referring to a letter from Secretary Bernhardt or one of his delegates to tell us what is an inherent federal function.
From the United
That's
States
gonna come
Solicitor.
from the solicitor's office.
Over the solicitor.
They requested it from them. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So that event is also a signpost. And as we look at ourselves not only as decision makers, but as a work group, which I think we should. We should go ahead soon after that March 18, I'm suggesting a day here, to convene again. And we would know a lot more then from that letter, which should partially answer at least number 7, but probably not completely. So I'm just go ahead, 30 minutes left. I wanted to get into setting up the next meeting, Mr. Chairman. That's where I'm going with that.
Yes, sir. That actually, the rollout date is on the council meeting. I feel like we should target the week after, that we do a special call meeting again and come right to this environment. Council, will I give you enough time to?
We'll make adjustments wherever we need, yeah.
Will you be able to be there and take care of that?
February 26th?
We're in March.
March 25th or?
23rd to the 27th. But yes, sir, that's our exact plan for the speaker in our Congress, that we just want to get you right back in here so everything's here. And then we will see about the money, because something we haven't had, and we're not going to go into executive, but our strategy is this. Everyone who's come after us, I think we'll go after them. And I'll just leave it at that.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just, my schedule is showing a possible meeting with Paula Hart and the Indian Gaming Land Management on her fee to trust on March 25, I believe. Is it February or March?
That's also the week of the National Name Game.
Oh, never mind, that's February. Never mind, because NIGA is in February.
Yes, sir.
Never mind, forget it, sorry.
Can we just work on schedules, because I know.
You will take care of that with Lacey.
Okay, so I would say this pre-application consultation is enormously important for us. You know, what's happening here is you've got new law with no tribe ever entered into a tariff, right? So every other tribe in America has to deal with BLM. They've got other issues that we don't have to deal with. We just get to deal with BI and then fantastic. God.
It's a blessing.
Thought Maria White was gonna Lulu. But, BI, so we just have to deal with them. So it's a little bit, instead of getting a bunch of agencies together, it's BIA for us. But the pre-application is where we gather information. Again, that's why, once you put numbers on this, you can then make judgments about what to do. Then I think after that point, if we decide it makes sense to take on leasing or rights of way or whatever it is, then we can make some judgments about that. Then we go into law creation through the Congress and the chief, working with the Minerals Council. I'm not sure it makes sense to get into that yet, just because we've got a lot of unanswered questions.
I'd like to know what the venue is for the consultation, the pre-application consultation.
They come
It
here.
would come here, and then would it be the Department of Interior, or would it be limited to the BIA? Would it include the Fish and Wildlife, the EPA, the other branches under the Department of Interior? And would it involve Congress and the Mineral Council, or just the Mineral Council?
I got this. It'll go with this folks right here, whoever's our trustee. We start having these others come in to interject their thoughts on it. They still fall under the umbrella of your federal trust obligation to the head right owner. And I think that will work in our favor. But yes, sir, I would ask for that. Council, do you have any other concerns?
My only other thing is that I think that on our side and working with the Office of the Chiefs, we've worked with Kenny Thomas's office, is that we really take a hard look during this time for any of the Department of Energy and Office of Indian Energy and Economic Development grants, just to see what's out there, and does it hurt to start looking at some other things that we should be applying for.
But we use the word consultation. And what I wanted to do in front of the chief and our Congress is that anytime we go into a consultation, those are going to be closed sessions that you're with us on.
And following up on that point, yes, I agree, those matters within energy development and that group should go forward. But for the regular MIFA and negotiations, I think this is a question to Wilson and David more. We began our negotiations in July, and by then we have already received what is available and what isn't available in their thinking, and we do the negotiations, as you know. So the October 1 fiscal year's approaching rapidly. I'm wondering what you all think about if the nation goes forward with the tariff. Are we looking at fiscal year October 1, 2021, or where do you think we might land, knowing that we have to do the negotiations, we have to do a lot of work between now and then? Time-wise. Because people are going to ask, if we're going to do it, when are you going to do it? Will it be October 1? And I said, no, maybe a year from October 1.
Well, the most accurate answer to that probably would have to wait until we find out a little bit more through the consultation process, but I would go ahead and assume for 2021 would be my recommendation. Just assume.
We have to.
I mean, just to be prepared, it could be that you would find information would come forward in the pre-consultation process where you can see that it's going to take more time. But I can see a scenario where you would have most of your questions answered, where you'd be prepared to move into going forward on it if you decided that's what you wanted to do at some point during 2021.
Okay. Thank you.
The other thing we might want to do is, to the extent, again, you've got this new law, we may want to go to Congress and say, create a pot of money for tribes trying to do this so we can get more money into our, not just 638, but other grants and opportunities to help build out infrastructure and staff. Okay.
I have one element of that. Some of our plugging money is not coming from this federal payroll guideline. There's another effort out there that I think that us as a council have already went to. United States government is already bringing us for this plugging element. We'd be happy to go after all of that residual monies because it came from the bonds and effort out of the state. And with that being said, is that we will also be going after the grants of many efforts, not only of that production, and I'll turn it over to Brother here in a minute. We want you involved in that. And if we can bring the donated dollar from this other fund, because basically you're gonna tell the government, you need to bring your wallet. Period. So with that, yes, sir.
Oh, thank you, Chair. One item, and this is something I sent to our council. It's kind of the 5 block categories that the BIA is doing for the Osage. I think a lot of our problems rest in one of those categories, and that's called leasing. They have field operations, they've got some other functions under these 5 categories. But that's where the FOIA stuff, information gets hung up. The leasing decisions to go ahead and lease based on NEPA and some of these other decisions. So I've encouraged our council to consider maybe the first shot at it is to go after that leasing category, 1 of 5.
I just wanted to point out,
Please.
yeah, that document is under BIA responsibilities tab in this material.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Which
so
one is it in?
BIA responsibilities.
responsibilities, and you see a letter, Chairman Waller from the superintendent, and it just has the Osage agency, the different, you see the superintendent's office, the branch of lease management, the branch of subsurface. So we've got sort of a summary of those offices, but, obviously this is not enough to make a decision on what to do, but we've got a sense of what to ask for because of this, what we would need to fill out.
Yes, sir. Continue, please.
All right, Osage, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the legal framework. You've seen some of this before. Again, and this is meant to be a discussion about what are the roles of the Minerals Council, the Congress, the chiefs under the Osage Constitution. So the Congress has authority, and this is, by the way, one of those areas that could use some amendment to the law, right? If you type that, cut and paste of that, and put it into Google, the Alaska Constitution would come up. Okay, that's exactly where you can tell that's exactly where it came from, but they edited out parts that just made it less clear. So it says the Congress can provide for all natural resources within the territory, the maximum benefit of the Osage people, then the rest of it's inconsistent with that, right? So natural resources includes minerals. So then it gets into more specific obligations under minerals that everyone is protected by the nation. The mineral royalties, by the way, it's not just royalties, but mineral revenues must be respected and protected by the nation through the Minerals Council. That's why I think, by the way, sometimes the Department of the Interior, they can get things wrong. Right? So if you look at this filed Federal Register notice, we had said, well, we have to work together on this, and they responded, for some reason decided to comment on this, that no, the nation is the government. Well, under our Constitution, the Minerals Council has constitutional authorities over minerals. So, like I said, I don't think that the Congress and the chiefs could just go do a tear-up for minerals matters without the council. This is why, right? So, the Minerals Management Agency is the Minerals Council. Leasing authority, that's the general, like Councilman Redcorn mentioned this, that the Minerals Council has that power to approve leases and propose other forms of development. You've seen all this, I'm sure you love it, the Minerals Council list. Protection of minerals proceeds, again, the Constitution says over and over, boy, you gotta be careful when it comes to minerals and minerals proceeds. Here it says that again. The nation cannot create any law or ordinance pertaining to mineral royalties that conflict with federal law. But we can't, that is a restriction on you. The government of the Osage Nation, not just the Minerals Council, all the elected officials and the government itself must ensure the rights of members of the Osage Nation to income derived from mineral estate. Now, we know we've got more than just Osage members that have rights, but the Constitution creates that limitation of protection on your citizens. And then again, the Minerals Council is an independent agency with no legislative authority. Now, we can create regulations under this rule, but we can't create laws. That is why the Congress is a necessary partner in creating legal infrastructure on Terra. And again, the Secretary has broad authority under the 1906 Act. This is from not even one of the amendments, it says here. All of that means the Secretary has a lot of authority, which I think gives them, the Secretary, the right to approve these things and act in when it comes to Osage minerals matters.
To executive order signature.
And the all fund, I just added that because again, that's what we sued the government on. They have, even then, the money coming from the mineral estate, they still have federal trust obligations under the 1906 Act to manage that. And I think that's why we probably can't include within a Terra collection of money, investment of money, distribution to headlight holders. You know, by the way, I would, even if we did have the authority, I'd recommend you not mess with that. Don't mess with that.
Thank you.
Okay. That's legal advice. Don't mess with that.
And it's good advice.
Same thing here. Again, the Secretary has broad authority. All things necessary to carry into effect these provisions. So I think the Secretary's got a lot of authority when it comes to a Terra. But the statute itself has some limitations. But again, we've talked about in business agreements, I know Councilman Foreman is very interested in this, everyone to be, marketing our own gas. Marketing our own gas. We're leaving money on the table, am I right about that?
Oh, yeah.
And so if we were to do that, I think all funds means they're still trust funds. The government still has to collect and distribute headright holders, but they're resisting on that, but a Terra is another way to get at that. Okay, existing rules, you know about those. I'm not going to get into those because of time, but that's sort of things that we should be talking about, would be a part of the Terra. And then, anyway, we could create the promise of it is to create a better regulatory environment for business in the Osage and more money to headright holders. I can tell you, the Minerals Council, what they repeatedly said is if it doesn't make sense for the headright holders, does not lead to more money for them, why would we ever do it? We can flex our muscle as a sovereign, that's important. But ultimately, they're acting in the best interest of the headright holders here. So I think that's it for my part. Yes.
I'd like to have Councilwoman Harden.
Wilson's like, oh my God, what does she want?
I had to go first, though. I had to go first.
I have one question. I agree with what Brandy said earlier about when we get, when we don't know the answers, sometimes we get hesitant to move forward. And I'll be honest, I've been extraordinarily hesitant about Terra. However, I am of the belief that knowledge is power, and we're getting ready to gain some of that power. And one of the questions that I have is, we all know about politics, and nobody likes Osage politics, probably less than me. But if we all decide together to go into Terra, and we have this off-ramp, and say the OMC, which may or may not be these 8 people, it may be totally somebody different, decides they don't want to do this any longer. Politically speaking, could the Congress and the executive say, well, now we're in this and we're going forward? Does that have to be a unanimous agreement among all parties?
I think that's it's a great question. A couple of answers. One, I think that under the regulation, if you say we're going to take leasing, business agreement, and rights of way, and we do a tariff for that, everything we can. It doesn't allow you just to take rights of way and give it back. You got to kind of give the whole thing back and start over. Keep that in mind, okay? I don't know why they did that, by the way, but they did. That's what the reg says. But with regard to this question of can the chiefs and the Congress unilaterally give back minerals matters to the government? Since you're a lawyer, I'm going to give you a lawyer answer. I'm not sure. No, but I would say that.
I was waiting on that.
And I asked the question in the reverse of what you just answered, which was that they would tell us we have to hold on to it, but the OMC would be trying to get it back.
I would say if the Minerals Council under the Constitution, one of the things that's clear about it is that this is the minerals management agency. So what are you going to do then? Say the nation says, we're going to take it, you cannot give it up. And the Minerals Council says, we're giving it up. What are you going to do? Take all those minerals functions? You can't do that. So, I mean, I'm not sure the exact legal, but I think it'd be very difficult for the chiefs and the Congress to say, no, we're going to go ahead and do minerals ourselves. I don't think you have the authority.
Are you, Doctor?
Yes.
You know, we were talking about what some other next steps that could be. This Wednesday, Councilmember Rebar and myself were going to, and this will be my first time going, several others have gone before, but it's the North American Energy Expo. It's in Houston, it's held twice a year. You know, just going through there's a government session that talks about challenges, barriers, all those things, and new laws. But one of the things that they're going to be talking about is going to be Terra. So I would encourage education, like you said, knowledge is power, that like when we're going to some of these, in order for you all to have a better understanding, I would encourage maybe at the summer, because of course we're leaving in 2 days, or tomorrow. And so, but there's new technologies. There is innovative ways that we can, you know, access this to get our oil and gas at. So that's why I'm going. I'm a business person. I want to look at how we can maximize our mineral estate. But the other thing we learned at one of our biannual consultations is that Osage was put under this administration as a priority 1. That means when we were here in our consultation, we had the top people sitting across the table in this room. And they said, what do we need to do to help? And we started talking about some of the challenges. So we know internally they're looking at us because why? It's domestic oil and gas. But we have to look at different ways to do this and to maximize the marketing of it. We haven't had a lease sale. We still have some barriers, but we are working diligently on it. And that's what we want to, when we go into a strategy session, hopefully Paul and I will be able to talk about some of those technologies that we found. The other thing, I know that the nation is involved in the National Congress of American Indians. Anytime that we can be up there and attend, you know, the difference of having a seat at the table and as opposed to setting the table, that's where Osage needs to be. And I'm glad that there was 4 from our nation there. I mean, I've been a member since I was 14 years old and been many times.
Good one.
No one has been there. Well, my aunt was the secretary of NCI, one of the longest serving secretaries in the executive committee. But it's really imperative that as much as I know that you all need to, you know, I know you guys got Indian child welfare issues, you've got healthcare, you have all these things that you look at, but now I think this door is open, and the more that you know about the oil and gas, the minerals part of it, I think it would be advantageous to the nation as a whole. I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Councilman.
I like Councilwoman Harlan's question regarding who had the authority to pull out or forced to stay. But am I correct that if we were to do a Tara, that we would have to have Congress write some new laws that would go along with the Tara? Could we not address that specific issue and others like it in the laws that the Congress would be legislating?
I just want to interject one item. Since I am the former nation employee under executive power, but we already have the stipulations over this permitting problem we have. You guys are set up for that. Where you ladies in second chair setting, we had the United States government, it's funding. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is saying funding, and our council has talked to us about that. But in any case, that's going to be the most important part for us. And I do appreciate that of your travels in this kind of weather, and then we're going right on National Congress of American Indians. Now, before I finish, I'll be meeting with the White House group in February, and what I'm questioning is that we don't want to roll this document out yet. Number one, we'll be trying to field questions over it when we don't have the answers. So is everyone agreeing to that for right now?
Yeah.
With that being said, yes, dear.
I have two questions.
You mind if I answer that question?
Yes.
To clarify, and mainly because David Mullen reminded me what part of the regulation when it comes to the question Councilwoman Harlan asked is that a provision in the reg says that you have to, if you want the government to reassume their duties, you have to do it the same way that you assume those duties. And I think that's by law, okay?
Correct.
Now, that being said, we can put into our TARA law how that will work between you. Like I said, you're gonna have to work together for this to work, including creating the laws on how powers each of you will have. That's gonna be what it is.
And we have passed a resolution already directing council to set up our business laws and struck some of our structure. So we will do that. We were looking for you all because, I mean, this is the group that does the oil and gas, so it would be only right that we will prepare those through council. And then looking for support on this side. I know many of you are shareholders to help carry the water and then have maybe a special session to start working on passing some of these laws. I mean, that's down the line, but we have already, by resolution, have said that we'll start working on the laws and structure for that.
And deliver those when we request that from you, because that's exactly what we got to plug in. And you will just help us under your legislation and the actual law you've already dealt with before. We will provide that. And then under your review and blessing, then you will make it a law. And right now, you're covering two of them already for us. And I think that we want to talk about this council. I like when David and them talk about 2021, I can just feel that noose tightening. If we were allowed the opportunity and blessing of the funding tomorrow, I would ask my council for a signature tomorrow. We cannot wait no longer. And I'm not desperate as much as I come out of there. We saw what good times are, and when they have hit the law, which Councilwoman Gray brought up, that's what I filed in Tranche 3 20 years ago in this chamber. So let's just fire it back up and go after them. With that being said, Brandon, are you done with yours?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I'd like the Congress and the Chief's office, if you have any questions, I get to hear these guys a lot. But go right ahead.
One request, if it's okay with you,
Yes.
Chairman. I enjoyed Mr. Pipeston's PowerPoint. It helps me to be able to review what we talked about. If you could email our clerk of Congress a copy of the PowerPoint,
Everything.
I would appreciate that, so I could review it and kind of have your notes to follow through. The
Also, now, just because we're talking about that, anything that you need from us, we'd like you to send it to Lacey so someone can keep in track like she does, and then we'll handle it accordingly.
Do you want me to send an official request for that then to Lacey?
Just so she can track us and take care of it, and it'll be
Okay.
done.
My second question.
Please.
When we sat down in, at the casino with was it the Department of Interior that was there when they were?
Justice and solicitor.
The consultation on the terror that I attended over there. I know that one question that kind of they dug the heels into the brakes on was permits to drill. I think that I've heard them say, because that's my understanding, in July of 14, when the superintendent issued her letter about NEPA, that they were having a difficult time getting it together to submit with their permits to drill. That's in my recollection how we got shut down. Have they made any more comment whether they're going to let us have the authority to issue permits to drill? Because I think it's key.
So if you see the NCAI resolution, one of the things it resolves is we're saying do not make permits to drill an inherently federal function. We want the possibility of the authority to take that over because that's where so much backlog happens. I don't know, what did they say when everything goes right to get a APD in the Osage? It's
That's where people lose their
months. I
leases.
can't remember exactly what the
200+ days.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Like 200 something
Up
days.
to over a year.
When
One person.
when the other 76 counties in Oklahoma can get a permit within 10 days.
Right.
We're 200 days in some cases.
So we have had a very active advocacy effort to try to make sure we can Terra that authority to issue a permit. Okay. Now here's the answer. So what they have told us is that, as I think it was handed out, the Secretary of Interior issued a secretarial order about this issue. But ultimately just says, I'm deferring to the solicitor.
That's what's going on.
So we do not have that list that's supposed to come out in March. That's what they were referring to about, here's the inherently federal functions. Now, they have told us they think we're gonna be happy with the answer.
While we're sitting there looking at it.
So we should see that the 18th.
One thing on that, I think some of those functions are being discussed between BIA and BLM. It's my understanding BIA has a broader list of things that they would allow or permit tribes to contract on. BLM has a new director that is not new, he's been in the government for a while, that is pretty anti-tribe. So there's been some bumps in the road on that as far as what the BIA was looking at and now having to try to work around what BLM is approaching, since they work with all other tribes, not Osage.
Thank you.
So again, we don't have to deal with BLM. I mean, I'll tell you, John Tasuda, who's in the Secretary's office, said, you guys have the advantage, you don't have to deal with BLM.
Other tribes shouldn't have to do that.
We'll be helping them later when you contract out your effort into other tribes. With that, I'd like to end this session. Council, thank you very much. We'd like to entertain motion to adjourn. I'll second that. Any discussion here? Now let's call for it. There's a clarification. We have a meeting on Friday. We want to know that, see, 3 of our council will be gone, so naturally, we're not going to handle anything that I just can't do it without them being there. And then if the nation calls inclement weather, we will start, not to have it. Is that correct? Once the nation closes? Because I'll be honest with you, we can't be running around here without your insurance. And I'll tell you why, I was with Camille Painberg when she fell. So with that being said, is there any other questions that you might have? You want us to go ahead and Lacey?
What's on the agenda? Is there anything that can't wait? You may not have a quorum, if the roads are dicey my way, I'm not coming.
No, I agree with that.
So,
It's
may not-
Oklahoma,
you
it
may
may
not
be
make
70
it.
degrees too.
We'll take care of our business, you take care of yours.
Let's talk about it some more.
With that being said, is that we just want to compliment you for being here. One thing about it is that you have brought something to the Osage that this has never been here before. He sat there longer, I sat with their fathers and their grandmothers. And I just want to thank my elders who come today. That's why we didn't go into executive session. We wanted everyone to know we're here for the Osage. And with that being said, I'm going to stand up and give short prayer. Let's see.
Yeah.
Why is because it's a special day. Why is because I have my veterans here today. They mean a lot to me. My elders are here today. I don't have that when I go home. I'm that. And it hurts me because I don't have the strength they had. I have my elder here today that's my blood relative. We put all his people away. And I had him pray for us. I want to think about that today. I want to think about the families that we had all those services for last week. My God, you know they're hurting. With that being said, this is only a job that Venture is being proud, respected as an Osage, and I'm going to pray for your family. Wakanda Ali, Wakanda Zinki, and Datsi Iwikanaji. Awate Zani Jika. All these people, oh Lord, I ask you to help them. I ask you to help their families. Some of them still have their elders. I want you to go home and take care of them. Lord, I'm going to deal with children again this evening, and I want you to take care of our children. I want them to have a day in which is a great one because they're in their homeland. Lord, I ask you to take care of our home. That you take care of Mother Earth. We have only one. Lord, we have only one home. We are thankful that you got us here. We are thankful that you kept us here. And we are thankful that we still have our ways. Our ways as Osages, Lord, has come through the millennium of time. Lord, we are told it ends one day. And we ask that prayer was there would be one Osage left. I ask that prayer today in front of my elders, in front of my people, my chief, my Congress, my council, all that here. Lord, we ask for the last of our soldiers in the field. Bring them home victorious. Lord, bring their families some kind of help, something that will make their day go better. Lord, I ask for everyone in that hospital. We have employees that just come through cancer, that operation. Help them, be with them and their families because it's a struggle. Lord, in closing, I ask you to take care of these families. They've made choices to give you this time for their people. And I know that it honors their loved ones in heaven. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen. Thank you. We're done. Excuse me, we need to vote this out. We have a motion on the floor and I second it for adjournment. Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Foreman?
Yes.
Councilwoman Ray?
Yes.
Councilwoman Harlan?
Yes.
Councilman Redcorn?
Yes.
Councilman Red Eagle?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilman Rebar?
Yes.
Chairman Waller?
Yes.
Secretary Davis?
Second chair, yes.
Secretary Davis?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you all. We done good.
I saw you at that conference, you told me
Yes.
I was across the room. Yeah, I had to.